it's based on your claims and your payroll, so that was the bill, the amount over. And as those of you may be aware, we have to estimate workman's comp and unemployment almost a year out, so we're never sure exactly how much it's going to be. We do our best to estimate it. The $20,480.04 is a public utilities increase. You may remember some discussion before the Board of Selectmen. The Wiscasset Water District increased their rates mid-budget season, and municipal buildings pay a commercial rate, and so that was money that we did not have budgeted for those accounts. Pleased to take any questions that you have. We bring this before you as part of the process in the bylaws for the Budget Committee, required to ask for your recommendation to go forward to folks. So
We don't have much leeway, we have to pay it, right?
well, practically speaking, the bills have already been paid.
Just raise the taxes to pay it.
No, most of it came out of fund balance,
Oh, okay,
so the bills were already paid.
okay.
And I know some of you came in and looked at the legal bills, and, you know, we're pleased to provide those to anyone that wants to see them, if you would like to take a moment to look at them.
So the question is, setting a date for a special town meeting?
Well,
Right?
that is,
Well, the Board of
That's
Selectmen
theirs.
will set that date once this is part of the process, to meet with you first, to answer any of your questions that you might have.
And is this 97 for the contracted services? Is this $97,000 more than we had planned to spend?
Correct. Yeah. You may remember in the budget previously, under legal services, you had between 20 and 25,000 for several different line items. And this year we did increase that. Actually, with Fred Queevy's help, we did a 5-year analysis of what the legal fees in Wiscasset have been over a 5-year period, and we hope our estimate is much better this year. You have to go through it. Chief.
No, go for it, Judy.
so did the select board vote to take that out of the balance, or is that an automatic? I know things change, and can you explain that process?
So the bills were presented to the board through the warrant process. And on each of the bills is an account number that those payments are attributed to. And you may remember through several meetings, there were various times that we updated the board and the public on what the fees were for the various litigations. We broke it down to different things. So yes, there is a process, and by the board signing the warrant, they approved those expenditures.
That
Go for it, Shane.
it's not clear because, okay, they approved paying it by signing the warrant, but the money is come from where?
The majority of these came out of the fund balance. You may remember there's a portion of it that they took legal fees out of contingency to cover the use of it. So they allocated it at different times, but the bills have been paid. Bernice, do you know exactly how much, all of this came out of fund balance?
It all would come out of fund balance, which wasn't appropriate.
Because there's no other place to take it, and that's why there's the town meeting warrant article asking for permission. It's sort of backwards, but.
It's a ratification of what's already happened.
Well, I'm still confused because back for several years now, I thought the board had a policy if there was an overdraft to go back to the town before taking care of that overdraft.
I'd certainly let any board member that wanted to speak to it address it, and I would say that's generally true, but because of the litigation that was involved in both of the lawsuits where we were required to appear, it was kind of an unusual circumstance, if you will.
Mary, what happens if the town turns it down?
That is a great question. I've asked that and not yet received a response.
Okay, cross that road when we get to it, on June 9th?
I mean, basically, it's a ratification of action that has already happened. But I have asked the question, I don't have the response yet.
Could someone explain to me, has the policy changed on an overdraft?
Since you've been on the board, it was.
My last year, it was,
Yes, your last year on the board, when it was closed in 2016, we had close to $180,000 in overdrafts that year. But we had that Article J, which just simply said, at the end of the year, if there are overdrafts, you take it out of surplus. And as you know, I was not successful that year in changing that policy. But I did get it changed last year. I thought that it would be more accountable if we put the surplus, the overdrafts before the townspeople, as we used to do in the past. As you know, in the older days, pretty much pre-town manager, when we had overdrafts, we went to the townspeople to get those overdrafts covered.
But that hasn't happened
But somewhere in the last
after the.
8 to 10 years, I'm not quite sure when,
I mean, this year.
let me just continue. The policy got changed, as you know, and rather than going to the townspeople, it was just automatically taken from surplus. 2016, we took 180,000 out from a dozen different accounts that overdrafted everywhere. And that had been going on for half a dozen years. This town is spending a heck of a lot more money, and it was just being taken out of surplus, and nobody was really the wiser. I wish these weren't here, but I think it's a better way of, I think it's a better way of doing it, just so that we know what is going on.
so what you're asking is, we're gonna put it before the voters, but it's after the fact.
Yes.
All right, but if you want to go down that path, Judy, the year that you were on the board, you and I and Judy, well, until June, we were in the exact same spot. We'd spent $180,000 and we didn't have any way to pay for it. And we put that article in the June town meeting and said, I'll just take it out of surplus. And that is how we handled it.
But in this year, this board voted to go forward with a lawsuit with money that this board didn't have. That's before I came on the board, but in 2017-18, you guys voted to bring this lawsuit forward when we didn't have the money for attorney's fees. In fact, I think we were already overdrawn on attorney's fees when you voted to go forward, because there was only $20,000 when you guys voted to sue the state.
Probably. For that matter, this
So I
account,
think that what's happening is we're gonna ask after the fact. Like what, if you did what you wanted to do, you would have gone to the voters before you took the money you didn't have. But instead we're going after, right?
That's correct. That's exactly correct.
yes, it is. I'm just pointing out, it's not like it's the first time this has happened.
No, it's not the first time it's happened, but you are correct.
It's
This is after. The
This is
bills
the-
had to be paid,
Right.
good, bad, or indifferent, they had to be paid. We took it and we paid them, knowing that we were gonna have to come back to the voters. And the consensus, I believe, of the board was to take it out of fund balance, that way we don't increase the taxes. It's less money in the fund balance.
Was that the first time, though, this has happened without Article J?
Yes, as far as I know. I don't believe, if I remember correctly, we have not had Article J since I've been back on the board for 3 years? If I'm not-
Yes, this is the first time we've done it differently.
Yes. That's why Article J, to me, is very important, because it gives us that 3-month leeway. It gives us the
What's Article J?
Article J.
What is that?
Article J, before this year said, if the selectmen overdraft any accounts at the end of the year,
Take it from,
it is just automatically taken from the general fund.
and then you guys changed it to say,
We would go back to this old format.
There were board members at the time that did not like Article J, and it was voted on at a board meeting to remove Article J from the warrant. And that's where we are at this point.
Which actually, I think it was unanimous vote to do that.
No, it was not. I never voted to remove Article J, I can tell you that, 'cause I believe.
Well, no, that, you have a awfully faulty memory.
No, I do not.
Well, the minutes are right out there, and I say you can vote for it. So,
So will we look forward to Article J again?
well, okay, but do you want that? I mean, before, like I said, we had overdrafts all over the place. Nobody had to come before the budget committee, nobody had to go before the townspeople. And whether it looks it or not, this is a huge step in the right direction, doing it this way. Rather than having accounts all over the place, and they were all over the place, overdraft here, there, and everywhere, and nobody had to say boo about it.
I can make, I'm gonna go back to 2008 when the airport budget went $2,500 over and I stood there shaking in my pants trying to explain it. But having said that, we got an $11.8 million town budget. This is pocket change. And I can understand when you're trying to figure a budget out 18 months in advance, it's gonna happen. Particularly when we go through the process and we try to squeak every penny out of every department. So I don't have a problem, but I understand how it can happen. So,
I wanted to point out, and I'm not saying this the right or the wrong way, but when we put these budgets together last year, the public utilities and the contracted services, this is actually almost 2 years ago when we put these together, we put them together realizing they probably would overdraft. We knew there was gonna be a rate increase, but we wasn't sure what it was. And we thought, well, we'll wait and we'll cover it out of the fund balance. The contracted services, I've been back on the board 4 years, and it is overdrafted every year. And until last year, we hadn't increased it in 3 years. We said, well, we'll try to hold the line, and if we don't, we will come back. And that's sort of where we are.
I agree with that. I think the reverse is you overestimate the budget and then you wind up with, a much higher budget, maybe $12 million a year.
And we've done a lot of things, I mean, that we get much easier to read printouts every month. I think it has been impressed upon the department heads, the manager, the selectmen, and we do try to hold the line. Everybody wishes that, these weren't here, but they are here.
Yes.
Another option to the Article J, a town of this size and a budget this size, why it only has $25,000 in contingency is a question that I ask. Why isn't it $100,000 in contingency? And that it would be coming from fund balance versus being raised out of tax dollars. Similar to what you're saying, is that there just isn't enough. And I don't mean to say cushion or fudge or whatever you want to call it, but for these kinds of things to not have to go to a town meeting because the townspeople already voted for it in advance.
Yeah.
I mean, we have the $25,000, but that doesn't cover much if you have any catastrophe or unexpected legal expenses or increases.
$25,000 of scratch compared to almost a $12 million town budget.
I agree.
Actually, the contingency is only 20,000, but last year you were on, the contingency was 35,000, and we knocked it back at 20. And we discussed at the budget process, did we want to alter Article J this year to try to pass it through in June, as happened 2 years ago? Well, I said, no, I think this is a better way, and, we'll take our lumps.
Okay, yes.
Are they looking for a motion from us to
They are.
recommend that they have a town meeting?
Yes. Yeah.
I make that motion.
We have a second.
Second.
Discussion.
May I make a
Yes.
comment? Should I?
Sure. Yes.
Ben has suggested, or has pointed out that legal billing has been overdrafted year after year.
And Marion has suggested has invited you all to look at the legal billing, to review it. I would encourage all of you, the Budget Committee, as well as the Select Board, to review that billing thoroughly. My partner and I, a year ago, did a FOA request for some legal billing. And we went through a year's worth of legal billing, primarily, I guess it was 2017. And frankly, in looking at it, I would have to say that there was a fair amount of questionable billing, some of which could even be considered frivolous. I don't know who decides to approach Bernstein Shore as opposed to going to MMA when a legal opinion is required. But I'd like to point out a few things. If past legal billing is indicative of future legal billing, I think you all need to pay closer attention. Over $10,000 was spent in an effort to eliminate our Historic Preservation Commission. That was billing that was just from Bernstein Shore, listed under general. There are many more mentions of the HPC in the legal billing under the Wawanok suit and also under the legal billing that was just dealing with MDOT and the project itself. But just under general, with very specific references to either removing the commission themselves or then the entire ordinance, we spent over $10,000 on that. We spent something in the neighborhood, and it could have been more, I don't know, but from what I saw, in the neighborhood of $35,000 because we were named as a party of interest in the Wawanok suit. Bernstein Shore, and I presume that our town manager requested of Bernstein Shore to put together a document explaining why they did that. And if anyone actually took the time to read that, it's, well, let's just say it's interesting. I have a really hard time seeing that their justification here was worth $35,000 of our tax dollars. On a really frivolous note, and again, as you were pointing out, some of these numbers are a drop in the bucket, and this one certainly is, but I think it's an example of poor decision making. When we were going through a lot of the things with the lawsuit, and the town was involved in the lawsuit against MDOT, there were citizens that had political signs in their yard relating to it, and there were complaints about those. And at one day, no one was ever notified that the signs were removed. And I went in the next day to discuss with our, at the time, code enforcement officer why that was, and I had the code in front of me. And he told me that, and I don't recall now if he was instructed to contact Bernstein Shore or if the town manager had done so herself. But Bernstein Shore had been contacted over whether or not it was acceptable to remove these signs from people's yards. While I sat with Stan Waltz, it took about 15 or 20 minutes to look at the code with him. He picked up the phone, he called MMA, and the answer was given to him. And the answer was actually different from evidently what Bernstein Shore had said, because we were allowed to put the signs up the next day. I don't know what the cost was to use a firm like Bernstein Shore to answer a simple question that MMA can answer for the town, but the reason I'm standing here right now is I am incredibly disturbed by the way in which some legal spending is taking place in this town. As I said, I don't know who makes those decisions. It's not clear at all to me as a citizen. And I hope you will all dig deeply into the legal billing and see what's going on so that things are a little straighter going forward.
Thank you for your statement. We have a motion?
Well,
We do, or, yeah,
we
any
do
other
have a
discussion?
motion,
Yeah.
discussion, yeah. I understand the process, I understand how we got here. I just don't understand the change in policy. And I would hope that, as we go into budget time, that might be clarified and discussed, so that we're all in the same understanding of what happens with overdrafts.
You're saying
And whether
possibly,
we go to the town or not.
yeah, you're saying possibly, like, if you have, if you know in advance, you can ask before we do the spending.
That when they have they see overdrafts is, you know, when they get this, and they see, oh, they're at 120% of their budget, then how is that gonna be handled? And I just think there needs to be, policy needs to be clearer to the public and to budget committee. And I'm going to support doing it because we're in the corner, we need to, but it's,
Okay. Looks like there's no other discussion, so let's call a vote. All in favor? Any opposed? And no abstentions, so it passes. Okay, next up we have, we want to thank the select board for being here. I did actually have a question for you guys. Going into the budget year, do you have, I know last year there was suggestions that our focus was to try to cut $500,000. Do we have any focus for this year that you'd like to give us as a select board?
I don't think the board has really discussed it at this point. But I think all of the members want to curtail as much spending as we can. But there will be a discussion that we will be having.
We'd be glad to be here.
That would be good.
I wasn't here last month, but I noticed in the minutes that there was a discussion about the budget committee being more involved in the process. And I gotta be honest, I thought the whole process last year was very dysfunctional. I didn't feel like I did anything. In the end, we voted and our vote got put on the ballot and that was it. And I don't feel we had a whole big say in the budget in the process. And I'd like to see the budget committee get involved in it early on in the process and then present something to the board of selectmen instead of the other way around. Just my thoughts.
There's two of us.
Yeah, you know, I was on the budget committee last year, and early on around this time, I reached out to all of the department heads so that we could sit and have meetings with them and talk about creative ways to increase revenues, and that just never happened. Like, we tried a couple of times, but whenever we do have that discussion, I still feel strongly like that's gonna be our way out. I know we can increase revenues over at the transfer station. I've been down there with my class, like, we looked at it, I know there's money to be saved there. So I hope that the budget committee is able to, maybe with more support from the select board, like, really get in and like help to do some of that legwork.
It is in the bylaws of the budget committee that the selectmen and the budget committee are supposed to meet in December, isn't it?
Before December.
they have to meet,
It says annually.
well, there is a meeting.
Between the town
and-
meeting in December to review the spending at that point.
No, the policy, yes. With the
The committee shall meet with the select board at least once every year between annual town meeting and December 15th in order to determine the adequacy of appropriated funds and other revenues for the current departmental operations.
Well, that would be a good opportunity to discuss, how we want to face the upcoming year.
I mean, I personally would like some feedback from the budget committee on what your thoughts are of your involvement. How do you want to be involved? You heard you say you felt you weren't involved that much. Then what can we do to make that a better process?
You want me to say it now?
If you want to, go ahead.
I had mentioned it to, I think it was Lori Smith, years ago when I was in the airport manager, that I thought that the whole process should start with the budget committee. And at some point after the holiday, early, maybe late winter, the budget committee presents the budget to the board of selectmen. Almost a town council type form of government. So that was just a thought. That's how I'm thinking.
It's interesting.
I was just going to use that same word. It would be an interesting approach anyway.
It would be interesting.
But you,
No, I'm speaking from somebody that's about this much experience in municipal government, so bear with me.
I remember several years that we had the budget committee and the selectmen together and go through the budget and meet with the department heads, which I thought went very well. Because sometimes I might have a question on a certain article, line item, you might have a different one to bring something up to the board. I think that's important. That way we all see it from both committees are seeing it. I hope we could do it again. I think it's worthwhile. I realize it's the town manager presents the budget to the board, but I agree there has to be more interaction between the budget committee and the selectmen and the department heads. I mean, that's just how I feel. And I'm only one member of the board.
I agree, I think that's a great idea. On this section 2.8, after what they just read, the committee shall inquire into and consider every article to be submitted before any annual or special town meeting which provides for the borrowing, raising, transferring, and/or appropriation of any sum of money, and shall make its recommendation to the town in regard to. It sounds like we should be sitting down with these different departments. And I know, I hate to say that, a friend of mine had a bumper sticker that says, I don't care how you did it, where you came from. But where I came from, the budget committee used to meet with them first and bring recommendations. Sometimes you can cut out a lot of stuff that the selectmen don't have to do. Might settle some things up front. Not to take anything away from the selectmen, but could
We're
find.
willing to share.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I haven't been to a budget meeting like this in a long time. But certainly the department heads are at your disposal if you want to talk to, whoever along the way.
Well, as part of the budget process, was what we're referring to.
Yes,
I think it would be good if we provided some guidance to department heads and committees on where we want them to go, so when they're budgeting, they're not just, status quo, spend as little money as possible, but, call me crazy, I would like to see the waterfront committee make some plans for having, working towards a time when we can have a marina down there. I know the conservation committee is working on a grant to replace the bridges at White's Island. That's stuff that's driven by the budget. So there's a cost sharing component in that, and those discussions are happening now. The budget committee should be in on that. So that, it's not just this, what I feel like last year what happened is we sat and people presented their budgets and we didn't have a lot of background on why, like what was the goal, all right? This is how much it costs for this year, but where is this leading us in 3 years, 5 years, 10 years? Or is this tied up with our plan? I would like to see more like sort of forward thinking with our budget and not just like a year-to-year process. And I feel like that has to come from us.
But we have we have a town manager form of government. That's what we have. We as a select board, we give her our guidance. We guide her and tell her what we want. If we want a 2% increase, if we want a 5% decrease. Then she takes it, it's her job, it's part of her job to meet and relay this to the department heads. They do their budget. They bring it back to the town manager. And I'm sure she goes over it with a fine tooth comb, I hope. Crosses things out and comes back and presents us with a budget. It is the town manager's budget that comes to the Board of Selectmen. We either say yay, nay, or whatever have you. At that point in time, that's when I like to meet with the department heads. Because they might have something in there that I question. Why do you need a particular piece of material or whatever have you? There might be a logical reason, there might not be. The same way with the capital. We need to discuss it, and I like the budget committee there also. That way we all see, we all hear the same thing. And then get some type of a meeting maybe together and go over the budget and discuss where we want to go. That's my thinking, as the way it should go. But we have a town manager form of government at this point in time.
That's what I was gonna, well, I was going in that direction because I had told this committee that when we talked about meeting with department heads, that we needed to go through the town manager, that she would end, but with the board's blessing, you know, that can happen, because she would follow your direction on that. But our ordinances are pretty narrow.
It is.
They just kind of described who we are, what our job is. And our job is to recommend every article that comes before the voters, either to make a vote on,
Recommendation.
to recommend or not recommend or no recommendation. And in that case, then we have to stand up and, it doesn't say we have to explain anything except a no recommendation, which is kind of loose. Why we didn't have any recommendation. But what Judy said, I thought that's a good working start for getting the boards together and sharing. It's communication is what it generally is.
Thank you, Judy. Kim, do you have anything?
Yeah, I just, like if that's what the ordinances currently are, it sounds like maybe we're talking about asking more, like maybe changing the ordinances so the budget committee can do more and work with the town manager more. Because the way that we're doing it is resulting in the taxes go up every year. And so you can't swing a dead cat in this town without hitting someone who says, the taxes are going up every year. We can't just keep doing it the way we've always been doing it, or else the taxes are gonna keep going up every year. So that's my whole thing. I just feel like maybe it's different, maybe it's gonna be hard to change it in ordinance, but
I think also, Kim, you have to look at
work.
MMA and their rules.
We can do all that, we can work within the rules, but I believe that we can make positive change. We have to, Judy, or the taxes are gonna keep going up every year. Like, we gotta do something differently. If we can't sit down with department heads and say, what can you do to generate more revenue? Like, your focus for the next 60 days is to brainstorm with your staff on how you can increase revenue into your department, and then come back to us. I don't know, why couldn't we do that?
It's a possibility. It's something to discuss.
Like, we have to be willing to try. We can only, like, you know, it doesn't hurt to try and not have it work out. So what, to try something else?
Nobody remembers it, but 3 years ago, taxes went down 2%. We did have a good year in there.
My point in reading that is it's vague, how we do our job. And I'd like to see some clarification. And I
We
don't,
have that power.
yes, we do.
We can fix our
Like
ordinances.
I say, check with MMA.
Yes, because I think that there's certain definitions, if I'm not mistaken, if I remember my class. Because there's certain criteria for the fire chief, there's certain criteria for committees. And I think this was taken right out of MMA. if I'm
Yeah,
not
when I
mistaken.
read it last meeting for the first time, I just looked at it and was kind of, well, when, who, where, why, that's not in there.
Right.
I think it's all entirely up to us. I just took my class in August, and according to MMA, like, the only thing we're legally required to do is put a warrant together for the town. All the rest is local. Like, we write our ordinances straight from like the ordinance about not parking your horse and carriage downtown up to the current day. So, I don't know, we can double check. I don't want to break any laws, but I feel like we have the power to change the way we do business in our town if we want to.
I think you're absolutely right, and I think we're all saying that if you want to, sit down and talk with the town manager, you certainly can do that at any time. You have to go to the manager, but if you want to talk to a department head, there's no reason that you shouldn't be able to.
And as an elected official, I don't see why your chairman or any of your committee members cannot call MMA yourselves and ask for clarification. You are a public servant. You're elected.
I think most of our ordinance for budget committee though was not necessarily taken from, it was tweaked over many years of tweaking by local people.
Right.
But there probably is something that might be very helpful to look at and
Maybe in another meeting, we can get together and make some suggestions and pass them on to you, and then you decide if you want to do them.
I think this
so
is
is
great.
that process that we might come up with areas in the ordinance that we think needs to be changed or firmed up or and we would present it to you and you give it to the ordinance review committee and they tweak it and then back to you and then to a vote. Right?
Yeah.
Sounds good. Okay, thank you very much for coming.
Thank you.
I appreciate it.
What's this presentation on CMP project?
I guess they're not here. On this side of the paper that,
Pardon?
I'm leaving too.
oh, in the Lincoln County paper, there was a mention of someone trying to, a CMP guy liking to come to our budget meeting to present the CMP project.
He's coming next Tuesday.
Oh, to there, so that's probably what it was again, so that is not here, so that's good. I just put it there just in case.
Right, Kim?
I think they're on the agenda.
Yes,
They are.
on the agenda
Oh.
for next Tuesday.
Good.
It was said in the selectmen's meeting, Judy said it.
No.
I was going to say to the rest of the budget meeting.
No.
She said it in the selectmen's meeting.
Spell my name correctly. M-A-L-O-N-E-Y,
I'll do my best.
not Mahoney.
M-A-L-O-N-E-Y?
Yeah.
No.
Okay. Go over these in your business, right? Sorry? Can we go over these in your business?
So we also need to
To approve the
approve
minutes. Yeah. I would figure that goes under old business?
Well, oftentimes you have a format that, and you go through and do, like you might even start with the pledge and then do, minutes.
Approve the minutes, okay.
Usually is up to the top.
Okay, we can do that. Let's
It
approve.
doesn't matter, you're the chair, you can look at, you can do it anyway.
We need guidance.
Yes. Fine, we're doing that. Do we, looking at the minutes from last meeting, we emailed them out today. Is there a motion to approve them?
I'll make a motion to approve.
Second. seconds. Okay, all in favor? Okay.
And do these get sent to,
Kathleen.
so they can be posted on the?
Normally they're to Kathleen or not.
Okay.
Normally that would have been done ahead of time, but I lost my notes from the last meeting until this morning, so.
Yes, thank you.
And the agenda
Yeah.
gets posted too, so people can see that. Thank you.
Okay, excellent.
For the training.
Okay. I guess. We have the treasurer's report? Mrs. Boyd, is there anything you'd like to say about that?
The only thing I'd like to say is this is just July through September, which is a quarter of the year, and as you can see down at the bottom, final totals were 23.89% spent for the year, which we should be at 25%, so we're right in the ballpark of where it should be. County tax bill is coming due the end of this month, which will make those percentages look much higher next month, because that's.
I'll see you again.
That's 100% of their bills.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Other than that, no, I mean, you folks had asked just for the general fund, which is what affects your tax base. So the first page are the departments for the expenses. And then the next 3 pages are the revenues and where we are percentage-wise collected with those. Are you happy to answer any questions?
Yes, I just have a quick question. At the last meeting, you mentioned that just because we're having some more expenses coming in for the taxes starting to come in, we might need to dip into some of the town fund. Were we needing to do that yet? Will that still be possible?
The tax anticipation note, you mean?
Yes.
We didn't have to borrow.
Okay, great.
Yeah. And I'm hoping not, because taxes are really starting to roll in. The $600 and some odd thousand that we have to pay for the county tax, $611,353. Hopefully, by the time we have to pay that, more tax money will be coming in. The school has still allowed us to pay them on an as-needed basis. So we have had to pay the $1,800 to Bernstein Shore to put the TAN documents in place. But to this date, we have not had to borrow from it.
So is that the difference, that we haven't had to touch that yet, is the school?
Yes, because we, instead of sending them the 500,000, whatever dollars it is each month, we're sending them what they need. They're still getting their revenues, the ed subsidy money, the school lunch money, those kinds of funds are still going into their bank account. And then we're sending over what they need. But we went the whole months actually of July and August without having to send them any money. So that allowed us to keep the cash. And that is the primary, between that and we took the money that the town authorized us to take from capital reserves at the first of the fiscal year. So those 2 factors have allowed us to not borrow.
Which is kind of unusual for us, isn't it?
For us.
No, not to have to touch that yet.
Yes. Yes, but I mean, we've always taken the reserve monies out. I don't believe we've always taken $1 million out of the reserve, or maybe we have in previous years, but not the most recent years. But having that $1 million that we didn't have to send to school for the first 2 months has helped dramatically. So I'm hoping to be able to make it through the year without borrowing from it, but again, it depends on how things go. I know that the paving projects that have been going on, those bills are gonna be coming in, the county tax will be coming in. But this is the time when taxes are due on the 26th, so that hopefully we'll squeak by.
If I'm reading this right, we've received 83.14% of all income budgeted.
Remember I said to you at the last meeting, you need to be careful of this report, because that's not correct. because the revenue was 100% booked for the taxes. And of course, we have not received that tax money, but for bookkeeping purposes, that's how it gets booked. Yeah.
Let me ask the question one other way. If we actually received 83% of the budgeted revenue,
No,
okay, so how much can we really receive roughly? What percent?
to be able to do that, you have to pull out the tax commitment and then figure back in what you received in actual
Okay.
taxes. And I can do that for you next time if that's what you want to know.
I was gonna say 83%, what are you gonna do the rest of the year?
And that's, remember I warned you last month that when you see this month's report, that
Yeah.
because we've committed taxes, it looks like we've
Okay.
received all of that. That's not the case.
If it's not too bad, I'd like to know how much we've really received.
Absolutely.
Because we get taxes they're this month.
They're due on the 26th, the first half,
And then the other half is due when?
and April 26th.
Okay.
Which is a Friday, just since the TV's on over there, we are open on those 2 Fridays.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Another consideration, and maybe it's something we want to ask the board about, and you might know a little, but the number of tax liens, and the board was being proactive to try to collect on many of those, and is that still?
It was supposed to be on the agenda for Tuesday night's meeting, but I believe there's a lot of other items on the agenda for Tuesday night's meeting, so it's got pushed ahead. And of course, Molly is just back from maternity leave, so she's been working on the list to present to the board. I'm assuming that it will be the first meeting that we have in November, that we will at least review the personal property taxes and see if we can clean them up, basically, because they're not collectible. And then look at the liens, because we have a significant number of liens of people that have either made installment contracts and haven't kept up with those installment contracts, or there's a variety of other reasons that we still have liens, and we need to figure out what we can do with them, working with the taxpayer first, of course.
Okay. And the sewer liens are also a big item that we
They are.
need to consider. The board needs to, and be, a question for them is, okay, where is that going right now? Because it's a tough one.
It
They're all
is.
tough, but,
It is, we just put sewer liens on again, and we just put tax liens on again. We're sending out foreclosure notices in December for property taxes for the 16 taxes. So certainly Molly and I are working together to get a list of the personal property tax to the board for the next board meeting, and then before we actually send foreclosure notices out, we'll look to see who is on the list for foreclosure and assess where we go from here with those.
Do you track the capital program, the money that would be the separate line item, the budget for capital programs?
For the monies that they voted to use at town meeting,
Yeah.
yes, absolutely.
Okay, you track that, okay.
Yep.
I would assume you did.
Yes, I have a question as well. For EMS, Parks and Rec, and transfer station,
Are you looking at expenses or revenues?
revenues. Their percent collected is lower than 25%?
It
For the
is.
year?
It is.
Are they feeling that it's gonna work out?
One of the towns dropped the contract, if you remember.
Yes, for EMS.
And that's part of the reason why it's down.
But is Parks and Rec and transfer station?
That I really haven't talked to either of those department heads.
I was looking at Parks and Rec, that's 17%.
Right, but a lot of theirs comes from the summertime, and this would have been from July 1st, so May and June would have been part of that. But certainly, you could talk with Lisa, or I could ask her, where she feels that they're going to be, and see if it's in a curve with last year, if this is where we were last year. As far as the transfer station is concerned, wow.
I mean, that's 8%, so.
But, okay, but with those, if you look at their budget,
No, it's contracts.
82,000 of the 245 is a contract with Westport that we haven't received the quarterly payment. And remember, this is for July, August, and September, so we should be receiving a quarterly payment this month from them.
And same with Alma.
81 from Alma too.
Sorry?
All
And 81
also?
from Alma.
That'd be another 40,000.
Yeah, it's all right.
Yeah, actually, the two of those is over, it's like 2/3 of your budget. It would be 2/3 because it's split between a third of each of the three towns, right?
When's it due?
Sorry?
When do they typically pay in?
Quarterly.
Waterfront's down also. I predict maybe the waterfront will be much lower, because I would assume that most of the schools.
Waterfront, a big part of that is the watercraft excise, which of course those the boat registrations are expire in December. So everybody had already registered most of
Okay.
them, so
All right.
I would expect that would kick in place in December, January when they're due again.
Okay, thanks. I was thinking summertime, that's when most people will be paying.
No, it's December 31st that boat registration
Oh, I have a boat.
expire.
On the airport, code 01, that $23,000 transfer, what is that all about?
That won't happen until the end of the year. What we did with the airport budget is the fuel sales are
Yep.
not part of the operation costs for
Correct.
the airport.
Yep.
So we pulled them out into a special revenue. So at the end of the year, when there's established what there was for a profit for selling those fuels, that's what will transfer back into the general fund.
End of the calendar, fiscal year.
Fiscal year, correct.
Okay, thank you. Okay.
I mean, we could do it on a monthly or quarterly basis,
No.
but since the fuel deliveries don't happen that way, it makes sense to leave it till the end of the fiscal year.
Gotcha.
Do you know if homestead exemption reimbursement is at the same rate as last year?
The same rate that we get it. I believe it actually went down a little bit, but we have received 75% of that, or close to the 75% of what they're going to send us. The rest of it probably won't come until next August. July or August is usually the other 25% of it. The local road assistance program used to come quarterly, now that comes annually, and that usually comes in December, January. Excise tax are up a little bit at 30% versus the 25. Actually, a little bit more than that if you include the rapid renewal with that, because we don't budget a rapid renewal, but they're combined together as far as budgeting purposes. We've asked the bank about interest rates, and they have raised the interest rate, as you can see on the bottom of page 2. We've already received $4,200 in interest income versus the $2,000 that we budgeted, so that would be an increase.
That's a
And the use
big
of
chunk.
fund balance, it's also on that page. That is for budgeting purposes only. We don't actually do a journal entry for that. So that would, if you did do a journal entry for it, that would increase the percentage of revenue that looks like we've received. Do you have a question?
I was just gonna say that was a big jump in interest.
Yes, it almost doubled what we were getting. Revenues are a little bit harder to stay spot on, that your percentage is accurate because of different things that come in quarterly or annually versus your overall expenses for the town, other than the county tax, the rest of them are pretty much, you can say that it's so much per month that gets spent or an estimate. Whereas the county tax is the one lump sum. The same thing with your debt service, you see that we're already spent 50% of that versus being only at the 25% because of the time of the payments being due. We have one, I think it's the RSU, that's 2 times a year, so we've already paid half of that versus just the 25%.
Explain to me, on the first page, 131, TIF tax increment financing, 231,000.
Each year, you know what the tip is?
Yes.
Okay. Each year, there is a certain budgeted amount with all of the calculations that happen through the assessment. Certainly, good evening. And that gets transferred over to a special revenue fund. That tip has a designated purpose that it can only be used for certain things.
Right.
Such as paying back the landowner as part of what that can be used for. So it's raised and appropriated in the general fund, but then we transferred it over to the TIF fund to make sure that it doesn't ever roll into undesignated fund balance, so that it's moved over at the beginning of the year, or not the beginning of the year, but after the taxes are committed.
And the, out of that $9,000, I understand, is goes towards the planner's salary?
It goes towards economic development, yes.
That's all the questions. Thank you very much for answering the questions and providing this report for us.
You're welcome. So is there anything different, do we meet monthly, is that what we're doing right now?
Yes, it's the second Wednesday.
Okay, so is there anything different that you would like to have for the next meeting? I know you want the revenues, where we are at percentage of the revenues. And would you like to see the capital projects and where we are on those?
It's not too much trouble.
Not at all.
Thank you for coming.
Yeah,
Yes.
you're welcome.
It's very appreciated. It's good to get answers. Okay. Number 2, do we have any old business to discuss? Hearing none. Any open discussions that we haven't already done? Excellent. And do we have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
Okay. Let's vote. All in favor? Okay. You're good.
7 o'clock.
Thank you.
We're in a different time zone this.
I know, I saw that. I thought it was like,
Somebody jumped the gun, spring ahead.
Did
No.
I think of that?
They haven't changed
Yeah,
it
it's
since.
the wrong direction, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Like I have rebound. Are they gonna be doing that? I don't know if they need to, the tax lien, capital improvement.
log me out.
It's